Did you know that most people who consistently manipulate others don't even know they're doing it? We have this image in our heads, a caricature from a cheap movie, of a villain twisting his mustache, consciously plotting to destroy someone's mind. But in my decades of work, sitting across from every kind of person you can imagine, from cold-blooded killers to petty embezzlers, I learned something far more unsettling. The most effective manipulation, the kind that truly hollows a person out, is often delivered with a smile. It's done by people who believe they are good, people who might even be you. The most common form of this is called gaslighting, and it's a poison that works so slowly you don't realize you're the one administering it. It begins with a simple, almost reflexive, need to be right. I'm talking about the habit of constantly correcting someone's memory. Let me tell you about a case. A man named Franklin. He was being investigated for financial fraud, skimming money from his elderly mother's accounts. When we brought him in, he was the picture of a devoted son. He spoke about her with such affection, such concern. But when we spoke to his sister, Margaret, a different picture emerged. She'd say, "I remember Dad's birthday in '98. Franklin promised he'd help with Mom's medical bills then." And Franklin would calmly reply, "No, you're remembering it wrong, Marge. That was '99, and I said I'd look into it. You always get the details mixed up." He'd say it with such confidence, such gentle authority, that Margaret would start to doubt herself. Over 20 years, he had chiseled away at her confidence in her own mind. He wasn't just disagreeing with her, he was replacing her version of reality with his own. He controlled the family history. And by controlling the past, he controlled the present. He wasn't a monster in his mind, he was just the more responsible sibling, the one with the better memory. He was the keeper of the truth. This isn't just about financial fraud, it happens in kitchens and living rooms every single day. Think about your last disagreement with your spouse or a close friend. Did you say something like, "That's not how it happened," or "You're misremembering"? Now, sometimes that's true. Memory is a fragile thing. But look at the pattern. Do you find yourself being the official record keeper of your relationships? The one who always has the correct version of events? The psychological principle here is deceptively simple. It's not about memory, it's about control. By invalidating someone's recollection, you are implicitly telling them that their perception of reality is flawed. Do that enough times, and they start to believe it. They stop trusting their own instincts, their own memories. They start relying on you to tell them what happened. This is a tremendous power imbalance. It turns a partnership into a hierarchy where you are the sole arbiter of truth. So, here's a question for you to sit with. When you correct someone, what is your true motive? Is it to genuinely clarify a factual error for the sake of accuracy? Or is there a part of you, deep down, that feels a sense of validation, of power, in being the one who remembers correctly? Do you feel a flicker of frustration or even anger when they insist their memory is the right one? The desire to control the narrative is a deeply human instinct, born from a fear of being misunderstood or, worse, being wrong. But when that instinct goes unchecked, you stop being a partner in a conversation and become a warden of their reality. And that's a prison with invisible bars. The second sign you might be unintentionally poisoning the well is a phrase so common, so reflexive, that it slides into conversation like a trusted friend. It's the ultimate defense mechanism, a shield that deflects all accountability. The phrase is, "You're being too sensitive." Or its cousins, "You're overreacting," "Lighten up," and "It was just a joke." These words are devastatingly effective because they don't attack the other person as argument. They attack the other person as right to feel. It's a classic interrogation tactic, flipped on its head. In the box, you try to provoke an emotional reaction to get to the truth. In a relationship, this phrase is used to bury the truth under a mountain of shame. I once consulted on a marital dispute that had escalated to the point of police involvement. The husband, let's call him Stan, was a pillar of his community. A friendly, outgoing guy everyone loved. His wife, Clara, was seen as difficult, high-strung, emotional. During one of their arguments, Stan made a cutting remark about Clara's recently failed business venture in front of their friends. When she recoiled, her eyes welling up with tears, he put his arm around her, laughed, and said to the group, "See what I have to deal with? She's just so sensitive." Their friends chuckled uncomfortably. Later, when Clara tried to tell him how much his comment hurt and humiliated her, he repeated it. "For God's sake, Clara, it was a joke. You're just too sensitive. You need to develop a thicker skin." Do you see the genius of that move? Stan didn't have to defend his cruel remark. He didn't have to apologize. Instead, he successfully reframed the entire event. The problem was no longer his lack of tact, it was Clara's excess of emotion. He made her the problem. He did this for years, and the cumulative effect was profound. Clara began to believe it. She started seeing her valid emotional responses, her hurt, her anger, her disappointment, as character flaws. She began to police her own feelings, to silence herself before he could. She thought she was becoming more mature, but what she was really becoming was more compliant. Think about this in your own life. When someone tells you that you've hurt them, what is your first gut reaction? Is it curiosity, a desire to understand their perspective, or is it defensiveness? Do you immediately jump to explaining why they shouldn't feel that way? Psychologically, this is rooted in something called emotional regulation, or rather, a lack thereof. When someone presents us with a powerful emotion, their pain, it can feel like an accusation. Their sadness feels like our failure. Their anger feels like our guilt. And if we can't tolerate sitting with that discomfort, the easiest way out is to invalidate their feeling. We tell them their emotion is wrong, so that we don't have to feel wrong. Here are the questions to ask yourself. Have you ever told someone they were overreacting, when what you really meant was, "Your reaction is making me uncomfortable, and I don't know how to handle it"? Have you used humor to deliver a sharp jab and then acted surprised when the other person didn't find it funny? Dismissing someone's feelings is a subtle but profound act of rewriting their reality. You're telling them that their internal compass is broken, and if you do that enough, they'll start to believe you, and you'll have all the power. There's a particularly insidious form of manipulation that masquerades as love. It's the most difficult to spot, both for the person doing it and the person on the receiving end, because it's wrapped in the language of care and protection. This is the third sign: weaponizing your good intentions. The guiding principle here is, "I'm only doing this for your own good," or "I know what's best for you." These phrases sound benevolent, don't they? They sound like something a loving parent or a devoted partner would say, but they are often the velvet glove on an iron fist of control. It's a way of making someone doubt their own competence, their own judgment, until they become completely dependent on you. I worked a case once involving a woman, Eleanor, and her adult son, David. Eleanor was in her late 70s, sharp as a tack, but a little frail. David had moved in with her to help out. On the surface, it was a beautiful story of filial piety. But we were investigating a tip from a bank teller who was concerned about large, regular withdrawals from Eleanor's account. When I spoke with David, he was the model of a caring son. "My mother gets confused easily," he'd say with a sad, knowing smile. "I handle her finances because she can't be trusted with them anymore. She'd give her life savings to a telemarketer. I'm just trying to protect her." But when I spoke with Eleanor alone, she told me, "David doesn't think I can do anything right. He tells me I'm too old to drive, so he took my keys. He says I'll forget to pay the bills, so he took over my bank accounts. He even answers my phone calls because he says I might get scammed. He tells me every day that he's just looking out for me." David hadn't just taken over her life, he had convinced her it was a necessary act of love. He had redefined her competence as incompetence, her independence as a liability. He wasn't just managing her affairs, he was managing her perception of herself. In his mind, he wasn't a thief, he was a savior. He genuinely believed he was doing what was best for her, but his help was contingent on her accepting that she was helpless. This dynamic plays out in less criminal ways all the time. Think of a husband who helps his wife by redoing the chores she just did because she didn't do them the right way. Or a parent who constantly makes decisions for their adult child. What job they should take, who they should date, under the guise of having more life experience. The underlying message is always the same. You are incapable, and I am capable. Therefore, you need me. The psychological root of this is often a deep-seated anxiety in the helper. They need to feel needed. Their sense of self-worth is tied to being the one in control, the one with the answers. It's not about malice, it's about fear. The fear of being irrelevant, the fear of their loved one making a mistake that might reflect badly on them. So ask yourself this. When you offer help or advice, are you empowering the other person, or are you fostering dependence? Do you step in to fix their problems before they've even had a chance to try on their own? When they succeed without your input, do you feel a sense of pride for them, or a slight sting of being left out? True support is about giving someone the tools to manage their own life. This brand of gaslighting is about taking their tools away and convincing them they never knew how to use them in the first place. It's a quiet, gentle dismantling of a person's autonomy, done in the name of love. Now, we come to a more subtle, more calculated form of reality bending. It's not about what you say, but about what you don't say. The fourth sign you might be an accidental gaslighter is the strategic withholding of information. This isn't about outright lying, it's about curating the truth. You provide just enough information to steer a person toward a conclusion you've already chosen for them. Then, when things go wrong, you can claim innocence and, more devastatingly, blame them for not having the full picture, the very picture you intentionally kept from them. It's a power play of the highest order because it makes the victim complicit in their own deception. I remember an internal affairs investigation I consulted on. Two partners, officers Miller and Diaz. Miller was the senior officer, charismatic and well-respected. Diaz was younger, eager to please. They were pursuing a suspect who ducked into a crowded apartment building. Miller told Diaz, "You cover the back. I'll go in the front. The guy's unarmed, just a petty thief. Don't go in unless you hear me call." Diaz did as he was told. Minutes later, he heard a commotion and a crash from a second-story window. He raced in, found Miller struggling with the suspect, and helped make the arrest. Later, the review board came down hard on Diaz for leaving his post. When questioned, Miller said with a straight face, "I told Diaz the suspect was unarmed to my knowledge, and I told him not to enter unless it was an emergency. He should have used his discretion and realized a fight constitutes an emergency." What Miller left out was that he knew the suspect had a history of violent resistance, and that the building was a maze of fire escapes, making a rear exit unlikely. He withheld that context. He set Diaz up to look indecisive and incompetent. Why? Because Diaz was a rising star, and Miller felt threatened. Miller wasn't technically lying, but he controlled the narrative by controlling the flow of information. He gave Diaz a map with all the most important roads missing, and then blamed him for getting lost. This happens in our personal lives with frightening regularity. Consider a couple deciding on a major purchase, like a car. The husband really wants the expensive sports model. He tells his wife, "Look, this one has the best safety rating and it holds its value really well." What he conveniently omits is that its insurance premiums are double their current rate and its gas mileage is abysmal. He's not lying. Those facts about safety and resale value are true. But he's painting an incomplete picture. When the first insurance bill arrives and his wife is shocked, he can say, "I told you it was a high-performance car. You should have done your own research if you were worried about the costs." He shifts the blame for his omission onto her for her lack of due diligence. From a psychological standpoint, this behavior is a defense against direct confrontation. People who withhold information are often conflict avoidant. They want to get their way without having to argue for it. It's a passive-aggressive form of control. You manipulate the environment, the data, so that the other person chooses what you wanted all along. This allows you to maintain the illusion of being collaborative and reasonable, while ensuring your agenda is met. Here are the questions to reflect on. In a disagreement, do you ever find yourself carefully selecting which facts to share? Do you leave out details that might weaken your position? When someone makes a decision based on your incomplete information, do you feel a secret sense of satisfaction of having won? The most dangerous truths are the ones that are only half told. Providing a partial picture is a way of saying, I will allow you to see only the part of reality that serves my interests. It's a quiet, insidious way of making someone a pawn in a game they don't even know they're playing. One of the most powerful tools in an interrogator's kit is emotion. You watch for it, you provoke it, and you use it to find the cracks in a story. But in personal relationships, emotion can be weaponized in a very different way. The fifth and perhaps most common sign of unintentional gaslighting is shifting the blame for your own feelings. It's the moment you make someone else responsible for your emotional state. The classic lines are, "You made me yell," or "I wouldn't get so angry if you weren't so infuriating," or even, "See? Now you've upset me." This is a profound and damaging reversal of accountability. It takes your internal lack of control and projects it outward, turning the other person into the villain of a story where you are the victim of your own feelings. I saw a tragic example of this with a man named George, who was in a domestic violence investigation. George never laid a hand on his wife, not once, but the emotional damage was just as severe. He was a man with a volcanic temper. When he'd get angry, he'd punch walls, throw things, and scream until he was red in the face. His wife, Sarah, lived in constant terror. When I spoke to George, he was full of remorse, but also full of justifications. "I have a short fuse. I admit it," he'd say, "but she knows how to push my buttons. She deliberately says things to set me off. If she would just learn to be a little more careful, a little less provocative, I'd never get like that. She makes me angry." George had convinced himself, and was trying to convince Sarah, that his rage was not his own. He treated it as an external force, a storm that Sarah's behavior summoned. He abdicated all responsibility for his own emotional regulation. The problem, in his reality, wasn't his inability to control his temper, it was her inability to control him. The psychological effect on Sarah was devastating. She started to believe him. She walked on eggshells, constantly editing her words, her actions, even her facial expressions, in a desperate attempt to manage his emotions for him. She became responsible not just for her own feelings, but for his as well. It was an impossible, soul-crushing burden. This tactic, even in its less extreme forms, is incredibly common. Think about a time you raised your voice in an argument. In the aftermath, did you apologize for losing your temper? Or did you justify it by focusing on what the other person did to provoke you? It's an easy trap to fall into because, in the heat of the moment, it feels true. It feels like the other person's words or actions are directly causing your emotional response. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how emotions work. Other people's actions are a trigger, a stimulus. Your reaction, the anger, the frustration, the yelling, is generated by your own mind, your own history, your own lack of self-control. Blaming them is the easy way out. It absolves you of the difficult work of looking inward and managing your own state. So, ask yourself these hard questions. Do you believe your emotional reactions are something that happened to you, or something you do? When you feel a flash of anger or frustration, do you see it as a signal to look at yourself, or as a justification to attack someone else? The moment you say "you made me feel," you are handing over the keys to your own emotional kingdom. You are making yourself a puppet and blaming the other person for pulling the strings. True emotional intelligence, true strength, lies in acknowledging that your feelings are yours and yours alone. No one can make you feel anything. They can act, and you choose how to react. Taking responsibility for that choice is the difference between a healthy relationship and a hostage situation. Humor is a delicate instrument. It can be a bridge that connects people, a balm for a painful situation, but it can also be a scalpel, used to make deep, precise cuts while maintaining an air of innocence. The sixth sign that you are unknowingly engaging in this behavior is when you use humor to question someone's sanity. It's the joking suggestion that they're crazy, unstable, or losing their mind. Phrases like, "You're starting to sound a little paranoid," or "Wow, someone's off their meds today," or the classic, "Are you sure you're not going crazy?" All delivered with a chuckle and a sly smile. It's gaslighting with a laugh track, and it is brutally effective because it leaves the victim with no good way to respond. I dealt with a corporate sabotage case that hinged on this very tactic. The head of a department, a man named Allen, was systematically undermining his top deputy, a brilliant woman named Brenda. He never did it in a way that could be proven. He'd misplace important files from her desk and then help her find them in an obvious place, saying with a wink, Brenda, you'd lose your head if it wasn't attached." In meetings, if she presented a bold idea, he'd say, "That's a creative approach. A little out there, but creative for everyone to hear." If she double-checked a detail, he'd pat her on the shoulder and say, "Don't worry, I know you get a little obsessive about these things. It's okay." He was painting a picture of her, brush stroke by subtle brush stroke, as being brilliant but unstable, unreliable, prone to hysterics. Brenda knew something was wrong. She felt like she was constantly on unsure footing, but every time she tried to confront Alan, he would feign shock. "What? Brenda, I was just teasing. My God, can't you take a joke? I think the stress is getting to you." He turned her legitimate concerns into proof of the very instability he was accusing her of. If she complained, she was humorless and paranoid. If she didn't, the undermining continued. He had her in a perfect trap. He was destroying her professional reputation and her self-confidence, all while being seen as the charming, funny boss. This is a common tactic in family dynamics as well. It is the sibling who constantly brings up an embarrassing childhood mistake as a joke to remind you that you are clumsy or foolish. It's the spouse who, after you express a fear or insecurity, tells you, "You sound just like your crazy mother." The joke provides plausible deniability. It allows the gaslighter to say something incredibly cruel and invalidating, and, if called out, to retreat behind the shield of humor. "I was just kidding," they'll exclaim, immediately reframing the issue as the other person's lack of a sense of humor, not their own malice. So, it's time for some introspection. Think about the way you use humor with the people you care about. Is it ever at their expense? Have you ever used a joke to make a point that you were afraid to make directly? When someone doesn't laugh at one of your jokes, is your first instinct to feel defensive and accuse them of being too serious? The root psychology of this is a form of cowardice. It's a way to express aggression or criticism without taking responsibility for it. It's a verbal jab followed by a quick retreat. But the damage is done. You've planted a seed of doubt, and when you repeatedly suggest to someone that they might be a little crazy, they just might start to believe you. That's not a joke, it's a slow-motion character assassination. Finally, we arrive at a form of manipulation so powerful that it requires no words at all. It's the use of silence not just as a reaction, but as a weapon. This is the seventh sign, the silent treatment as a form of proof. This isn't just about taking some time to cool off after an argument. That can be healthy. This is a deliberate, calculated withdrawal of communication designed to punish, control, and make the other person believe they are so fundamentally wrong, so unreasonable, that they are not even worthy of a response. The silence becomes the evidence of their guilt. It's an act of emotional exile, and it is profoundly crazy-making. I worked a case once that involved a contested will. Two brothers, Mark and Paul, were fighting over their father's inheritance. Paul believed the will was unfair and had been influenced by Mark. Whenever Paul would try to bring it up, to have a conversation, Mark would simply shut down. He wouldn't answer his calls. He'd ignore his texts. If they were in the same room, he would stare right through him, an impassive brick wall. He wouldn't yell or argue. He would just erase Paul from his existence. After weeks of this, Paul became frantic. He started doubting his own position. He thought, maybe I am being unreasonable. Maybe I'm the greedy one. My behavior must be truly awful to provoke this kind of reaction from my own brother. Mark's silence was more powerful than any argument he could have made. He was communicating a very clear message. Your position is so outrageous, so beyond the pale, that it does not merit the dignity of a response. You are the problem. Your behavior is the reason for this schism. Mark had framed his stubborn refusal to communicate as a righteous, pained withdrawal. He made Paul believe that he was the one who had to fix things, to apologize, to crawl back and accept Mark's terms, just to end the torment of the silence. It was a complete power move, disguised as passive hurt. This is a devastatingly effective tactic in romantic relationships. One partner does something the other dislikes. Instead of talking about it, the offended partner retreats into a stony, impenetrable silence. They'll still be physically present, but emotionally, they've left the building. Every attempt at conversation is met with a shrug, a one-word answer, or nothing at all. The other person is left in a frantic state of anxiety, replaying the event over and over in their head, trying to figure out what they did that was so unforgivable. They are forced to become a detective in their own relationship, searching for clues to a crime they didn't even know they committed. The silent partner holds all the cards. They become the judge, jury, and executioner, and they can end the trial whenever they choose, usually once the other person has begged for forgiveness. Psychologically, this is rooted in an extreme form of passive aggression and a deep-seated need for control. It is often a learned behavior, witnessed in one's own childhood. The person using it cannot tolerate the messiness of direct conflict, so they opt for a cleaner way to dominate the situation. Ask yourself, when you are angry or hurt, is your instinct to withdraw completely? Do you use silence to make the other person feel how much they've wronged you? Do you wait for them to break, to come to you with apologies, before you are willing to re-engage? There is a vast difference between saying I need some space to think before we talk and creating an emotional vacuum to punish someone. One is an act of self-regulation, the other is an act of war. It's using absence to manipulate someone's presence, forcing them to doubt their own reality until they conform to yours.